Repairing damaged body lines is not as difficult as you might think once you know the process. And today I'm going to share with you the steps it takes to get perfect body lines in your repair. Howdy everyone, Chris here. This channel is all about helping you repair your vehicle or your restoration project. And today we're straightening a dent in the rear part of this door. It was hit right on the body line, bent the edge of this door. So the first thing we want to do is straighten out that edge, get that gap lined up perfectly with the quarter panel. So what I'm doing is I'm taking two rubber hammers, I'm supporting it with one and hammering out the inside until it gets back into shape. I'm careful not to damage the inside of the door because we don't want a paint in there. Now that the door edge is straight and lines up perfectly with the quarter panel, we're going to go ahead and evaluate the rest of this dent, and we can see that that body line has been crushed in by the impact. When a dent is created, it raises the metal around that damaged area. So this has created a high area right in the middle of this door. But by pulling out this body line, we're going to relieve a lot of that pressure and hopefully eliminate a lot of extra body work on this door. The next step is to grind this metal clean. I'm going to be welding on this, so I need clean metal to pull out that body line. Now I'm going to be using an electric dent pulling tool called the G90E. It's an inexpensive tool that's going to help me start the process of pulling this body line out. Now you may not have a tool like this, so there's a few different options you can use. You could remove the inside door panel so you can have access to the back side of this dent and then push it out with a pry bar or something of that nature. You could also use a stud welder to weld onto the body line and pull that dent out. But regardless of how you get the dent out, whether you're pushing or pulling, you're still going to have to do a little bit of body work to get that body line perfectly straight. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. To remove the paint, I use my angle grinder and a 36 grit roll-lock disc. And once we have all the paint ground off and clean, I need to find out where that body line is. This is a body line tool. And on the quarter panel, I can see where that body line is. So what I do is I just set my adjustment and then I can draw that line down this door. Now it's going to change just a little bit because this is damaged, but this is going to give me an idea of where to place my welds so I could pull that body line out. This is the tool I'm using today. It's a spot welder dent puller. I've had this for about a year. I purchased it off Amazon. If you're interested in finding out more about this tool, I'll leave a link to a couple videos in the description. Now I'm going to choose to use the wavy wire on this. This is the perfect opportunity for the wavy wire. Because the wavy wire is flexible, I can lay it right on that pencil mark where that body line should be and weld it on. So I use the tip of this tool to press against the wire and then it just welds it onto the panel. Once I have the wire welded on, the next step is to use the claw hook and the slide hammer that comes with this tool to pull out the dent. So this claw just hooks over the wavy wire and then you can either pull it out or slide hammer it out. Now you don't want to pull it out too far, so I want to be careful, but I just want to pull it out until that dent mostly pops out and this body line is back into shape. With just a couple pulls, we release the pressure on this dent and let that high area release and that low area come up. And 90% of that came out. This is going to save us a lot of time in the end. After a few more pulls, this body line is back into shape, but it's not perfect yet. We still have a lot of damage on the edge of this door that we need to straighten with some filler, and then I'll show you how to refine this body line so it's perfect. I wiggle the wire back and forth and it comes right off. Now I want to feel over this dent to make sure I don't have to do any more pulling on that body line. Next step, I want to clean this off real well. So I'm just using some spray away glass cleaner to wipe this down so I can get a good look at that damaged area. And I can see that most of that damage came out. We do have some scratches here that I'll share with you how to take care of. But most of that damage is now below that body line on the edge of the door. Next, I need to straighten the dents on the edge of this door. So I'll switch over to the triangle tip. And what this does is I can weld into the center of that dent and then pull or slide hammer that damage out. Right now, I'm just using this tool to pull out the large dents that I see. Once we get those out, I'm going to fine tune it. We'll use a little bit of guide coat to show us any high or low areas. And then I'll show you how we fine tune this and create that perfect body line. Here's a little trick I use to find low areas in bare metal. Powdered guide coat doesn't really work that great on bare metal, so I'll take a marker and I'll just fill it in as much as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just looking for the low areas. Once I have it covered, I'll go ahead and grab a metal file and I'll file the metal, holding that file flat against the panel. This will expose any high areas and show me my low areas as well. This is just another style metal file. It's just a little bit more aggressive. It's going to show me my high and low areas a little bit better. Here you can see where the metal file has removed the marker, so now I can see where my high and low areas are, and then continue pulling with the G90E. Pulling this metal has created some high spots, so in order to correct those, I've taken my shrinking slapper and my body hammer, and I'm going to lay that flat against the panel and hammer those high areas down. I use the slapper tool to spread out the blow of the hammer so I don't create any dents. Now I'm using a little bit of flat black spray paint to create another guide coat so we can again see where our high and low areas are. After filing this down again, we can see where our high and low areas are. Wherever that guide coat is sitting, that's a low area. So we need to whip out the G90E and finish pulling out these low areas, and then we'll talk about the next step. Before I go ahead and apply filler over this, I want to feel over this repair area and tap down any high areas that might cause problems when I block sand my filler. If I block sand my filler and I break through into bare metal, I'm going to have to tap it down to level that panel out. So I want to go ahead and get that corrected now if I can. I'll go ahead and lay out my body line one more time. Now I can use this as a reference when I go ahead and lay a piece of tape on it, and then we'll apply our filler right up against that tape, and that'll give us a nice clean body line. Now I have this dent relatively straight, and we need to prepare this for some body filler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my palm sander and some 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to machine sand around this repair area. We'll feather edge out the paint, so we'll smooth out that paint so it's a good transition from the repair area to the old paint. We also want to get those 80 grit scratches in that paint, so if we apply filler over the edge of that paint, it's going to adhere properly. I prefer to lay my body filler over the edge of the paint. This just creates a better transition for the repair. Now we're ready for some body filler. The body filler we're using today is the Evercoat Z Grip. We just put a little hardener on there. Follow your mixing instructions on the body filler you're using. But the main thing is you want to fold it in so you're eliminating air, putting air into the filler. Mix your filler in until it's all one uniform color and you don't have any streaks. You can see that I put a piece of tape right on that pencil line. This is going to help us create a nice body line to start off with and shape. On your first pass of filler, you want to press it into that panel so we have good adhesion, and then add just a little bit and build it up till you have enough material that you can sand and block it flat. Now, you don't have to worry about it being perfectly smooth. You want it to be smooth. You don't want a bunch of craters that you're going to have to fill later. If it's not perfectly smooth, that's okay, because we're going to be sanding off most of this filler as we block it straight. Once I'm happy with the application of the filler, I'm going to go ahead and pull the tape while the body filler is still wet or relatively wet. You can let it harden up just a little bit. Now, I'm going to go ahead and apply some filler above that body line because it's a little wavy there. We need to straighten that out. Now, you might want to wait until it cures up a little bit. I did it while it was still wet. You may wait until it cures up just a little bit so you don't mess with your body line. Now I'll grab a small firm block with some 80 grit sandpaper on it, and I'm going to work this panel in sections above the body line and below the body line. And we're just going to sand along that body line, follow it, shape it as much as we can, and get this smooth. You'll also see me use my palm sander with some 80 grit sandpaper on it. I'm just knocking down the roughness of this filler and smoothing it out. Now that we've shaped the body filler with the orbital sander and some 80 grit, we're going to go ahead and apply a guide coat, and this is going to show us our low areas when we're blocking. We're going to use some 80 grit sandpaper on this medium firm block. We're going to hold the block flat and block in an X pattern whenever possible. We want to go in all different directions to level this body filler out. As we block this filler, you can see the guide coats start to disappear. This means we're getting this panel straight and flat. After blocking both sections of this door, below and above the body line, I found that there's a few little wavy areas above this body line. So I've mixed up a little bit of icing. This is a polyester finishing putty, and what I'm doing is laying a thin coat above that body line. And as you can see, once again, I'm using tape as a guide. We're laying it right on that body line, the peak of that body line, and then we'll put a thin coat over it and peel it while it's still wet. If you're finding value in this video, support the channel by liking this video and commenting down below. I'll pull the tape while the icing is still wet, and we can take a look and see how nice and sharp this body line is. Now, we don't want a sharp body line, so we're going to have to correct that, and I'll show you how we do that. First, we need to block out this filler. I'm using a little bit of 80 just to knock off the roughness, and then we'll quickly switch over to 180 grit sandpaper. You want to gradually reduce the coarseness of your sandpaper in order to get a fine scratch before you start primering. And icing sand's real easy with 180 grit sandpaper. I'll add another guide coat to it, and then we'll block out those 80 grit scratches with 180 grit sandpaper. And you can see the 80 grit scratches around this repair area. That's what we want to remove. We want to get those fine-tuned to 320 grit scratches at least before we start primering. Off camera, I used my orbital sander with some 180 grit sandpaper to sand out those 80 grit scratches around this repair area. Now I have switched over to 320. Now, when using an orbital sander over the body work, you want to be careful because you can create waves in that, and we spent a lot of time blocking this to get it perfectly straight, so we don't want to do that. So just be careful. If at all possible, you can block over it with 320 grit sandpaper to remove 180 grit scratches. That'll help keep it straight. This door and quarter panel have been repaired before, and if we look closely here, we can see bodywork scratches underneath the paint and clear coat. This is because whoever repaired this didn't fine-tune those scratches before they primered it, and that primer shrank into those scratches, and then you can see them after you paint. Now, we don't want this, so that's why we go through the progression of sandpaper from 80 to 180 to 320 to 600. This is an important process to get a quality repair. In order to soften that sharp edge of the body line, we're going to take a foam pad or a 320 grit scuff pad, or even a soft block here. And we're going to wrap it with a piece of 320 grit sandpaper, and we're going to run over that edge of that body line to dull it just a little bit, make it look like OEM. Now our bodywork is straight and sanded properly. We're going to back tape the edge of this door and mask this door off for some primer. Now, we only want a primer over the areas that have been sanded, so we'll use masking paper to mask off the unsanded paint. The primer I'm using today is the Roberlo ME1. This is a direct-to-metal primer. It's a urethane 2K primer. The mixing ratio is 4:1, so we'll add our primer, and then we'll go ahead and add our hardener. We'll mix it up and get ready to spray. The gun we're going to use today is the 3M Performance gun, and I love this gun. It's very versatile. It has interchangeable tips that are easy to change from 1.3 to 2.0, and you can use this for sealer, for paint, for clear coat, everything. and it does a really nice job, applies a really nice finish. We don't need a lot of air pressure when we're applying this primer, so we're going to set it at about 15 psi. I'm going to go about 1 to 2 turns out on my volume, and I'm going to narrow my fan pattern down quite a bit because I want to be really controlled where I put this primer. We'll put 1 good coat of primer over the repair area. You want to make sure you get all the scratches covered. If you have any scratches outside of the repair area, make sure those are covered with primer, and then we'll let it flash off for 15 minutes and put our second coat on. To learn more about paint and body repair and build your skill, check out one of these videos now. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.